how does the lawlessness in post-Nazi Germany set the stage for the future of psychedelics? Like, can you talk about that time and like all that shit that was going on and how that affected the future culture of LSD?
It's a very complex question, but I'll try to give a picture. I mean, I was interested in the narcotics control officer that the United States armed forces, well, actually the American government, I'm sorry. He was part of the military, but he was employed by the American government because he came from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, this guy. And his files are in Washington. I read them by chance. I found them, and he's describing how he arrives in Berlin, and it's like complete chaos in 45 in the summer. Um,
And this is Arthur Giuliani.
yeah, that's his name,
That got
Arthur Giuliani. Yeah. Well, people were just cutting trees in the park so they could light a fire in the winter, and there was actually starvation in the city, and there was no shop, there was no store, so you had to buy. You got your things on the black market. So the black market was like your department store. You go black markets and you trade basically. So Germans
mm,
had like valuable, maybe some medals from the Nazis. They were trading that for like Snickers or stuff like that. So for Americans, it was a great time. Also for the soldiers, like if they could trade some of their cigarettes, you get like
I bet.
like a steel helmet for it or something. And drugs were also traded quite liberally back then. There was no law basically in Germany. I mean, Berlin was divided by the four allied powers: Soviet Union, United States, France, Great Britain. And they all didn't really like each other. So every sector of Berlin had its own regulations. And that is, of course, perfect for something like drugs. There's no real regulation, and and drugs are everywhere because German army had a lot of drugs. German army didn't exist anymore. The Wehrmacht studied the drugs, but the drugs still existed. So pervitin, methamphetamine was being traded, heroin, which was a German product. Um, and this Giuliani now, his job was to bring order to the chaos, and his boss, his name is Anslinger. He was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which later became the DEA, and Anslinger he was against drugs. His first job was to monitor the prohibition against alcohol, and he miserably failed, and then alcohol was legalized again. So then he picked cannabis. Cannabis was legalized in the United States. He was more successful with keeping and making, persecuting weed smokers. Because he was also racist, and he hated the Afro-American jazz scene in Harlem. So he wanted to find a tool to attack the jazz scene, which to him was undermining the morale of America. Uh,
Yeah.
so, like Billie Holiday was one of his enemies, and so this is a right wing, racist, awful guy who happens to be the director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and determines U.S. drug policy. And
Yeah.
Berlin for him was like a playground. He wanted his agent to create a new anti-drug law that all the powers of the sectors, like the four allies, all agree on. Like under the pen of the United States, everyone agrees to this anti-drug policy that's then executed, and the Americans are the big winners. They made Germany drug-free because Anslinger wanted to make the whole world drug-free, so he was pushing his agenda into the United Nations. He was the drug ambassador at the United Nations, and United Nations were forming back then were under the America was the most influential country within the United Nations because they were the most the economy was the strongest and the military was the strongest, so they had leverage against nations. So everyone had to adopt the American anti-drug laws. So actually, Anslinger's racist prohibitionist scheme became our reality today.